June 10th, 2001. Ray Mentzer walked into his brother's apartment for what he thought would be just another ordinary day. What he found instead would haunt him for the rest of his life, which tragically would only be 2 more days. His brother Mike lay motionless in bed, gone at just 49 years old. The man who had once achieved bodybuilding perfection, the first athlete in history to score a flawless 300 at Mr. Universe, was found alone in a small apartment, his final moments witnessed by no one. This wasn't supposed to be Mike Mentzer's story. He was the intellectual of bodybuilding, the philosopher with 20-inch arms, the revolutionary who changed how millions of people train. He had everything: the perfect physique, the brilliant mind, the respect of an entire industry. But somewhere between the bright lights of championship stages and that quiet morning in June, something went terribly wrong. The journey from celebrated champion to isolated recluse is one filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and demons that even the strongest physique couldn't fight off. Mike's final years tell a story the fitness industry doesn't want you to hear, a cautionary tale hidden behind supplement ads and motivational quotes. What destroyed the man who seemed indestructible? The answer is more devastating than you could imagine, and it starts with one night in 1980 that changed everything. To understand how far Mike fell, you need to know how high he climbed. November 1978, Mexico. The Mr. Universe competition. Mike Mentzer stepped on stage and did something no bodybuilder in history had ever done. He scored a perfect 300. Not 299, not close enough, absolutely flawless. Every single judge gave him top marks in every single category. His physique was so precisely developed, so scientifically constructed, that there was literally nothing to criticize. But Mike wasn't your typical meathead who just loved lifting heavy things. Before bodybuilding consumed his life, he was a pre-med student diving deep into philosophy, devouring the works of Ayn Rand and studying the principles of logic and reason. While other bodybuilders were doing endless sets because that's how it's always been done, Mike was in the library researching muscle fiber recruitment, recovery science, and neurological adaptation. He applied rational thought to every aspect of training, and it showed. This intellectual approach led him to create Heavy Duty, a training philosophy that flipped bodybuilding on its head. Forget spending 4 hours in the gym doing 20 sets per body part. Mike proved you could build more muscle with less, way less. 1 or 2 brutal sets taken to absolute failure, then get out and let your body recover. It was blasphemy to the old guard, but the results were undeniable. His own physique was living proof that science could outperform tradition. By 1979, Mike was unstoppable. He won the heavyweight division at Mr. Olympia, standing on the same stage as the legends. Magazine covers sold out, seminars, endorsement deals flooding in. The trajectory was clear. 1980 would be his year to claim the Mr. Olympia title outright, and cement his legacy as the greatest bodybuilder of his generation. Everyone in the industry knew it. Mike knew it. He trained with laser focus, refining his already perfect physique into something even more extraordinary. Nothing could stop him now, or so he thought. What happened next would shatter not just his dreams, but his entire mental state. October 1980, Sydney, Australia. Mike arrived at the Mr. Olympia ready to dominate. Then the rumors started spreading backstage like wildfire. Arnold Schwarzenegger was coming out of retirement. After 5 years away from competition, the Austrian Oak was entering at the absolute last minute. Mike couldn't believe it. Arnold hadn't competed since 1975, had been focused on his movie career, and suddenly he's back. The whole situation reeked of something fishy. The night before the show, tensions exploded. Mike confronted Arnold face to face, and witnesses say it nearly turned physical. Mike, normally so controlled and logical, was ready to throw hands with the biggest name in bodybuilding history. He accused Arnold of turning the sport into a circus, of disrespecting everyone who had actually prepared properly. Arnold just smiled that famous smile, completely unbothered. That smile would haunt Mike for years. Competition day arrived, and Mike walked on stage in the best condition of his life. Sharper than his perfect scoring Mr. Universe. More detailed, more symmetrical, more complete. Anyone with eyes could see he was the clear winner. But when the judges' scores came in, Mike's world collapsed. 5th place. He didn't even crack the top 3. Arnold won despite looking noticeably off his prime condition, soft in areas where Mike was razor sharp. The fix was in, and it wasn't even subtle. The head judge was Arnold's literal business partner and close friend. The promoter had massive financial incentives to have Arnold win. The storyline of his comeback was worth millions in publicity. Other competitors like Frank Zane and Boyko were equally shocked by the decision. Even fans in the audience were booing. But none of that mattered. The decision stood, and Mike's dream died on that stage in Sydney. Something broke inside Mike that night. This wasn't just losing a competition. His entire philosophy had been based on logic, reason, and objective truth. He believed that if you applied scientific principles and did everything right, you would get the results you deserved. The 1980 Mr. Olympia proved him catastrophically wrong. Politics, corruption, and who you knew mattered more than anything else. For a man who built his identity on rational thought, this was an existential crisis. The downward spiral began immediately, and it would take him to places darker than anyone could have predicted. Mike retired from competitive bodybuilding at 29 years old. Just walked away from the sport that had defined his entire adult life. But walking away didn't bring peace. It brought financial ruin. The IFBB didn't take kindly to Mike speaking publicly about the judging corruption. While they never officially blacklisted him, suddenly his seminar bookings dried up. Magazine features disappeared. Endorsement deals evaporated overnight. In 1980, Mike was pulling in over 200 grand a year. By 1982, he was scraping by on nothing. Then 1985 hit him like a freight train. His father passed away, the man who had first introduced him to bodybuilding, gone. The grief was overwhelming. At the same time, the bodybuilding magazine he'd been writing for shut down, eliminating one of his last income sources. And his relationship with girlfriend Kathy Gelfo, one of the few stable things left in his life, fell apart. 3 devastating losses in 1 year, each one pushing him further into darkness. Mike needed to keep working, keep producing, keep staying relevant somehow, so he turned to amphetamines. Not for partying, not for fun, for productivity. He'd take them to power through 16-hour writing sessions to maintain the manic energy needed to keep his career alive. It worked for a while, keeping him functional when everything inside was falling apart. But substances always demand payment eventually, and Mike's bill was coming due. The cracks started showing in ways that terrified people who knew him. His behavior became erratic, unpredictable. The brilliant mind that once dissected training science with surgical precision was now spiraling into paranoia and delusion. Friends didn't know whether they'd get rational Mike or someone completely unrecognizable. The man who had once stood on stage as the epitome of physical and mental discipline was losing his grip on reality, and the worst was still ahead. By the mid-1980s, Mike had been hospitalized multiple times for psychiatric evaluation. These weren't brief stays, we're talking extended commitments where doctors struggled to stabilize him. The combination of grief, substance dependency, and untreated mental health issues created a perfect storm. Each hospitalization would provide temporary relief, but Mike would discharge himself and fall right back into the same patterns. Tom Platz, the legendary bodybuilder known for his massive quads, found Mike one night lying in the gutter outside Gold's Gym in Venice. The same gym where Mike had once been royalty, where his photos hung on the wall of fame alongside the greatest bodybuilders in history. Tom barely recognized him, disheveled, incoherent, mumbling about conspiracies and betrayals. It was like watching a Greek tragedy unfold in real time. Things got even more disturbing. Mike walked into Gold's Gym one day and started ripping his own pictures off the wall. His pictures, the ones celebrating his achievements, his perfect score, his contributions to the sport. Other gym members watched in stunned silence as this once great champion tore down his own legacy, shouting that it was all lies, all meaningless. Security had to escort him out, and whispers spread through the bodybuilding community like poison. Mike Mentzer had lost it completely. The arrest came next. Details were kept quiet, but word got around. Former peers who once respected his intellect now dismissed him as just another cautionary tale, another guy who couldn't handle the pressure, and cracked. They'd see him on the street, avoid eye contact, cross to the other side. The man who revolutionized training methodology was now the guy people pitied or feared. His delusional episodes became more frequent, fueled by the toxic mix of unprocessed trauma and chemical dependency. January 1990 marked the absolute bottom. Mike was committed to a psychiatric ward for 4 full weeks. Not a voluntary check-in, not a quick evaluation, a full month of confinement because he was deemed a danger to himself. The philosopher who once lectured on logic and reason was now strapped to a hospital bed. His mind fractured into pieces. During those 4 weeks, somewhere in the fog of medication and therapy, a thought broke through. A simple realization that would either save his life or be his final moment of clarity before complete destruction. What happened next, nobody saw coming. Lying in that psychiatric ward, Mike had an epiphany. The voice in his head was clear, almost like his rational self breaking through the chaos. Go back to what you know, Mike Mentzer. Bodybuilding, training, the science that had once made him great. He'd spent a decade running from the sport that betrayed him, but maybe that was the problem. Maybe the answer wasn't to abandon his life's work, but to reclaim it on his own terms. When Mike walked out of that hospital in February 1990, he made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He quit the amphetamines cold. No rehab facility, no gradual taper, just pure willpower and determination. The withdrawals were brutal, but Mike had survived worse. He started rebuilding his life piece by piece, slowly reconnecting with the bodybuilding world he'd scorned for so long. People were skeptical. They'd seen too many false starts, too many promises that led nowhere. Then something incredible happened. A young British bodybuilder named Dorian Yates reached out to Mike, asking him to apply heavy-duty principles to his training. Dorian was hungry, dedicated, and willing to trust Mike's methods completely. Mike poured everything he had into coaching Dorian, refining the heavy-duty system to new levels of precision. The results were absolutely undeniable. 1992, Dorian Yates wins Mr. Olympia using Mike's heavy-duty training. Then 1993. Then 1994, 95, 96, and 97. 6 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles, dominating the sport with a level of mass and conditioning that rewrote the rulebook. Every single victory was vindication for Mike. The methods the bodybuilding establishment had mocked, the training philosophy they dismissed when Mike was at his lowest, it was now producing the most dominant champion the sport had ever seen. Mike didn't need to win the Olympia himself anymore. Dorian was living proof that heavy duty worked. The respect came flooding back. Iron Man magazine brought Mike on as a regular columnist in the early 1990s, and his articles became some of the most read pieces in bodybuilding journalism. He wasn't just regurgitating old ideas, he was evolving heavy duty, incorporating new research, debating with other coaches, reclaiming his position as one of the sport's premier intellectuals. The magazine gave him a platform to reach millions again. In 1994, Mike partnered with his brother Ray and Dorian Yates to launch MYM, a clothing and supplement company. Finally, financial stability returned. The business leveraged Dorian's rising fame and Mike's legendary status, and it actually worked. Mike was making real money again, not scraping by, not dependent on unreliable seminar bookings. He had a sustainable income doing what he loved. His books became bestsellers. Heavy-duty and high-intensity training the Mike Mentzer way flew off shelves, translated into multiple languages, studied by trainers worldwide. Mike was back on top, but this time it felt different. He wasn't chasing external validation or trying to prove himself to corrupt judges. He was sharing knowledge, helping people, building a legacy that actually mattered. The comeback seemed complete, but the universe wasn't done with Mike Mentzer yet. Behind the success, behind the vindication and the best-selling books, his body was hiding a secret, a genetic time bomb that had been ticking his entire life, waiting for the perfect moment to detonate. The diagnosis came like a punch to the gut: antithrombin deficiency, a rare genetic disorder that causes blood to clot far too easily. Mike's blood was literally thickening in his veins, forming dangerous clots that could travel to his heart, brain, or lungs at any moment. There was no cure, only management. The same genetics that helped him build a perfect physique were now threatening to destroy him from the inside. Then doctors discovered Ray had it too. Worse, Ray's kidneys were failing rapidly. By the late 1990s, Ray was on dialysis 3 times a week, spending hours hooked up to machines just to stay alive. The brothers who had conquered bodybuilding together were now fighting a battle they couldn't win through willpower or training intensity. Their own DNA was betraying them. Mike developed blood clots in his lungs. The pain was excruciating. His breathing labored. He was a man who had once moved inhuman amounts of weight, whose cardiovascular system had powered through the most intense workouts imaginable, now struggling to draw a full breath. Doctors put him on blood thinners, warned him about the risks, told him to take it easy. But taking it easy had never been Mike's style. In one of his final interviews, just weeks before he died, Mike spoke openly about his health struggles. No bravado, no tough guy act, just honest conversation about mortality. He talked about the genetic condition, about watching his brother deteriorate, about accepting that some battles can't be won through logic and preparation. The interviewer noted how calm Mike seemed, almost at peace with whatever came next. Something unexpected happened during this dark period. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the man Mike had nearly fought in 1980, the symbol of everything Mike thought was wrong with bodybuilding. Arnold called Ray to check on him during his illness. After 2 decades of bitter silence, Arnold reached out. The gesture meant more than anyone outside the situation could understand. Old wounds didn't fully heal, but they stopped bleeding quite so much. The shared suffering brought Mike and Ray closer than they'd ever been. They'd always been brothers, always been training partners, but facing death together created a bond that transcended everything else. They spent long nights talking about their lives, their regrets, their victories. Ray would finish dialysis and go straight to Mike's apartment. Mike would help Ray through the exhaustion and nausea that followed each treatment. They were all each other had left, 2 warriors watching their bodies betray them in slow motion. Ray begged Mike to slow down, to rest more, to stop working himself into the ground. But Mike was still Mike, perfectionist to his core, driven by something deeper than logic. He had projects to finish, knowledge to share, a legacy to cement. Rest could wait. There would be time to rest later, he told Ray. But time was something neither of them had left. June 9th, 2001. Mike and Ray were working together on a new project, a high-intensity training DVD that would capture Mike's methods for a new generation. They spent the entire day filming, scripting, perfecting every detail. Mike was in his element, explaining the science behind each movement, demonstrating proper form, sharing decades of accumulated wisdom. Ray operated the camera, offering suggestions, helping his brother create something they both hoped would outlive them. As evening turned to night, Ray packed up the equipment and headed toward the door. Mike was still at his desk, hunched over papers, revising the script they'd use for the next day's filming. He had notes scribbled in the margins, corrections, additions, always improving, always refining. Ray paused at the doorway and looked back at his brother. "Mike, it's late. The script is fine. Come on, man, you need to get some sleep." Mike waved him off without looking up. "Just a few more minutes. I want to nail this section about eccentric contractions." "Go ahead, I'll be fine." Ray hesitated. He knew that look, knew Mike wouldn't stop until everything was exactly right. "Please, brother, just go to bed. We'll finish tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Mike agreed, still writing. "I promise. Now get out of here before you miss your bedtime." Ray smiled despite his worry, shook his head, and left. Those were the last words the brothers would ever exchange. June 10th, 2001, morning. Ray came back to Mike's apartment for another day of filming. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Louder. Nothing. Ray had a key. Mike had given it to him months ago in case of emergencies. His hands shook as he unlocked the door and stepped inside. Mike was in bed, lying peacefully like he was just sleeping. But Ray knew. He knew before he crossed the room, before he touched his brother's cold skin, before his mind could even process what his eyes were seeing. Mike Mentzer, at 49 years old, had suffered a massive heart attack in his sleep. The antithrombin deficiency, the years of stress, the genetic curse, it had all caught up with him in the quiet hours of the night while he slept, alone. Ray's world shattered. He called 911, went through the motions, answered questions he couldn't really hear. The paramedics confirmed what Ray already knew. His brother, his training partner, his best friend, was gone. The shock hit Ray like a physical force, crushing his chest, making it impossible to breathe. Ray was supposed to go to dialysis that day. He didn't. He couldn't. He sat in Mike's apartment, surrounded by his brother's belongings, the unfinished script still on the desk, the camera equipment still set up from yesterday. How do you go hook yourself up to a machine when your entire world just ended? The medical staff called looking for him. Ray didn't pick up. June 12, 2001. 48 hours after finding Mike's body, Ray Mentzer was discovered in the same apartment. He had passed away, likely from heart complications related to missing his dialysis treatments, but everyone who knew them understood the real cause. Ray died of a broken heart. The grief, the shock, the absolute devastation of losing Mike. His body simply gave up. Two brothers, two champions, two men who had survived everything the sport could throw at them. Gone within 2 days of each other. The bodybuilding community was stunned into silence. How do you process a tragedy like that? Mike and Ray Mentzer, who had stood together on stages around the world, were now gone. Their final chapter written in the cruelest way imaginable. Today, walk into almost any serious gym in the world and you'll find people training with heavy-duty principles. They're doing low-volume, high-intensity sets, pushing to failure, following the exact methods Mike developed over 40 years ago. His books still sell. His articles get shared. His training philosophy influences everyone from weekend warriors to professional bodybuilders. Mike's intellectual legacy survived him, spreading far beyond what he could have imagined during those dark years in the 1980s. But here's the cruel irony that cuts deepest. Mike Mentzer dedicated his life to teaching people about optimal health, recovery, and training science. He understood the human body better than almost anyone in his generation. Yet genetics and the demons from his past destroyed him anyway. All the knowledge in the world couldn't save him from a condition written into his DNA before he ever touched a barbell. All the scientific understanding couldn't protect him from the psychological wounds that never fully healed. The bodybuilding industry lost more than just a former champion when Mike died. They lost one of the sharpest minds the sport has ever produced. A man who could articulate the why behind every exercise, every rep, every recovery period. While other coaches relied on bro science and tradition, Mike brought actual scientific rigor to bodybuilding. He made people think, question, experiment. That kind of intellectual contribution is irreplaceable. Imagine being Ray in that moment, walking into Mike's apartment expecting another day of filming, finding your brother cold and lifeless instead. That image haunts everyone who knew them. The camera equipment still set up, the scripts Mike had stayed up perfecting scattered across his desk, all those plans for tomorrow that would never come. Ray had spent years watching Mike fight his way back from the edge, had celebrated every victory in his brother's redemption arc. To have it end like that, so suddenly, so finally, no wonder Ray couldn't survive it. Mike Mentzer's story isn't a neat narrative with a satisfying ending. He clawed his way out of absolute destruction, rebuilt his reputation, helped create champions, wrote best-selling books, and influenced millions. By most measures, he succeeded in his comeback. But redemption remained incomplete. He never got to grow old, never got to see heavy duty become the mainstream approach it is now, never got to fully enjoy the respect he'd fought so hard to reclaim. What stays with you isn't just the tragedy of how Mike's life ended, but how close he came to a different story. If he'd gone to bed when Ray asked him to, would his heart have given out anyway? If he'd pushed less hard, rested more, would those extra years have mattered? We'll never know. What we do know is that Mike Mentzer lived exactly how he trained, intensely, uncompromisingly, pushing beyond normal limits until there was nothing left to give. The first bodybuilder to ever score a perfect 300. The philosopher who revolutionized training. The broken man who climbed out of of psychiatric wards to influence millions. Mike Mentzer's final days broke hearts, but his legacy refuses to die. And somewhere in a gym right now, someone is doing a heavy-duty workout, pushing one brutal set to absolute failure, carrying forward the methods of a man who gave everything to the sport that both made and destroyed him.